And then I got into nonprofit work. And I was asking people to give me their two most precious things, their time and their money. And I realized, oh my gosh, I am responsible for being the vibe custodian. If it's good, if it needs to be cleaned, if it needs to be tended to, because even clean places need toilets cleaned.
Welcome to Vibecast, the podcast that dives deep into the heartbeat of workplace culture. I'm your host, Kristi. Join me in conversations with extraordinary leaders as we unravel their experiences, both positive and negative, that have impacted workplace culture. This podcast is more than storytelling. It's about actionable insights. Are you ready to transform the vibe at your workplace? Let's go. Today, I got to chat with Holly McIlwain, a pro in leadership development and personal growth. Holly is the chief navigator of Narrow Spaces, where she works as a professional coach, group facilitator, and organizational health trainer. She's also the creator of the Narrow Spaces Show, a masterclass in integrated living, a go-to resource for people juggling the complexities of work and life. Holly has had a dynamic career that spans education, tech, nonprofit, and leadership consulting. She's the founder of the Brave Women Project, a nonprofit that builds community and empowers professional women to take bold, brave action. Currently, she's part of the leadership team at Winners Partners, where she uses psychometric tools to strengthen organizations from the inside out. Holly has impacted thousands through her work in human resources, talent development, and organizational leadership. Her expertise has been recognized by HR Today, From Day One, Bonusly, and more. Her passion for integrated living and authentic leadership shines through everything she does, and I can't wait for you to hear more. All right, Holly. Well, thank you for joining me. The first time we talked was like we had known each other forever and we could just roll forever. And so I'm just so excited for this recording to kind of dig a little bit deeper, get to know you a little bit more, understand all the wonderful things about you and your impact to creating vibes in the workplace. So thank you for being here, and I'm willing to share, all the things.
I love it. Well, I'm excited to be here. And I did feel the same way. Like I said to you when we met, okay, now you have a new best friend. You're stuck with me and we could literally talk forever. So this is just a celebration of that. And I love talking about the vibe. So I've been really excited for this conversation.
Amazing. Well, as I do with all my guests, I just would like to start the conversation with you articulating how you define a vibe in the workplace, or just a vibe in general. Like, what does it mean to you and how would you explain it to somebody you're talking to?
I mean, vibe is the smell of the place. It's either the stink that is stuck on your clothing when you leave that you just like can't get rid of because it's a stink, or it's this aroma that you carry with you everywhere else you go. And I think about some of the best and worst places, like you can get it. It's either an aroma or a stink. And so when you are in an environment that feels really good, that aroma sticks on you. It's like Nana's kitchen, And when you're in a place that stinks, you cannot wait to burn your clothes.
Yeah, that is such a good way to put. I have yet to have somebody explain it exactly like the last person. But it all generally fits into the same category, right? Like, yeah, an aroma. I really, really like that because everybody knows what that feels like, or can relate to that, right? So talk to me about your journey in experiencing vibes, and then maybe any defining moment where you decided this is super important to me. This is, I want to spend time focused on this. I want to impact other people through good vibes. Talk to me a little bit about, it doesn't have to be like an interview where you talk me through your resume, but I'd love to just know the aura or the sense of how you got to where you're at today. And then we can talk a little bit more about the impact that you're making on people today.
For sure. Well, I love work. I love, 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 love work. And there's a couple things about work that I learned at a very early age. And so it's given me appropriate perspective and allowed me to know when I can be a vibe architect or when I'm a vibe custodian. And that's been like really powerful. So, early in my working days, and I'm talking like part-time employee days, I recognized that I was not necessarily at work to make friends, and I shouldn't rely upon the people I work with to be my friends. I needed to show up at work and do what I was hired to do it to the best of my ability, do it ethically and honestly, and leave the drama out of it. Now, I'm talking like teenage years, like teenage girl years. And somehow I had this wisdom that this was an important skill that I needed to learn because, again, you can get the aroma or you can get the stink. And so different places had different cultures, had different vibes. And so as a 15, 16-year-old walking into a situation and being able to observe it, talk about power. Talk about learning a skill that I was able to take with me through the rest of my life. The other thing that I recognized at an early point in my career, and I want to say like college, was that if you really understand what you're there for, then work becomes part of life, not an adversary to life. And that became really powerful because it helped me manage my energy. And sometimes you love your work so much, you just overdo it. When I was single, I loved to overdo work. I loved to put everything plus, right?
Yeah.
But then you become responsible for other humans, or you get into a leadership role where other humans look to you to set the tone. And you can't do that anymore because it creates a stink for other people instead of an aroma that people want to like keep smelling. So that was like another phase that I went through in my journey of understanding what the smell of the place really could be. And then I got into nonprofit work. And I was asking people to give me their two most precious things, their time and their money. And I realized, oh my gosh, I am responsible for being the vibe custodian. If it's good, if it needs to be cleaned, if it needs to be tended to, because even clean places need toilets cleaned.
For sure.
Right? I mean, especially like, let's go. But sometimes there was no vibe. Sometimes there was no culture setup. Sometimes there was no vision for what your time and money was being used for. And so I had to create this as 24, 25, 26-year-old. Oh my gosh. Thankfully, it had this long runway of working and observing and learning that I was able to create to be the architect of that vibe and bring people in and form them to care about their work in such a way that they were energized by it, not depleted.
I have so many questions. So how did you, because, I have a 15-year-old and she's just entering the workforce and I see her friends and I see the difference in them of some of them are very observant and very aware and some of them are completely unaware of their situations, of who they're impacting, of their actions and behaviors. So, how did you learn this at such a young age, right? Like, was it learned? Was it just in you? My youngest is 10 and she just feels all the feels. And so I think she's like very aware because she's a feeler. Whereas like my older one's more of like a doer. So I don't know, but like how did you have all this wisdom early on and like what would you say to people who are raising young kids, right? I know this isn't a parenting podcast, but I think leadership and creating vibes starts very young as you have shared with me. Like how did you become aware of it? How did you have this wisdom and then how did you know to like do something with it?
Yeah. So I think it's three parts. One, I am the youngest in my family, and I watched all of my siblings make great decisions and make mistakes. And so I learned early on that certain lessons you can observe another person learning and take the value without the pain. That was really an important piece of growing up. The second piece is failure. I failed fast and safely in my younger years. And I think that's a really important piece of early career formation and early childhood and adolescence is, and my background was in adolescence. My degree, my education degree was in middle childhood. And so I worked for a long time with middle childhood and with high school and college. And I pay attention to the brain development of young people. And that was a huge part of the education I provided in my early career. Well, my own early childhood, I grew up on a farm and I saw my siblings make mistakes. By the time I got to middle school, my parents were exhausted. And so they just let me free range. So from the age of 12 to 17, I made mistakes. I failed. But the failures of a 15-year-old, so different from the failures of a 35-year-old. So by having really true fast failures, I was able to learn how to recover. And there was no one there. I drove myself to and from work. So if I had a bad day, I just had to deal with it. And thankfully, I drove a stick shift. And sometimes I'd grind the gear a little bit too much, Like, the reality is that there
That seems like
are.
a pretty safe way to take it out on something.
I know. My dad would say, you know what, we replaced a lot in those cars. But, there is something so important about having early work experiences because navigating the human relationships with the public, being in the service industry is powerful. With your management staff, when your parents aren't there to save you from trouble, and with your peers outside of a school environment. And so I really get excited about those first jobs, about early career. I think we learn so much and it really helps me.
So then take me to you being this custodian of the culture and then becoming the architect. So, and what were some of the things that you were doing in each role? And then how did you make that transition, right? Because those are very different roles, in my opinion, right? It's great to see it from both sides, but different type of skill set, I would say that it takes to be a custodian and an architect. And I think that's an important distinction because I think there's many leaders out there who think that they're one and probably want to be, but aren't, and probably better suited to be the other, right? Maybe better suited to be a custodian versus an architect or an architect versus a custodian. So talk to me about how you kind of played each of those roles, what you did at like the simplest level, and then the transition between the two.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm going to go to the simplest level because it's the most fun in just a second. But I'll say that the architect's role requires a really intentional look at the engineering of people and culture, role clarity, vision clarity, strategy, and resources. That's a piece that comes into play, but it only exists if you have already established the custodial culture. And so the custodial culture really is that it's the grimy stuff that I made a commitment early on in my very first role, my very first professional role, that I will never ask a volunteer to do something that I was unwilling or unable to do myself. Now, let me give you a
That's a big statement.
yes. Okay. Physical example is I had recruited, this is crazy. So one of the projects I worked on in my early career, I recruited a group of 150 professionals and teenagers combined, but professional architects, engineers, roofers, siders, mechanics, engineers, electricians, plumbers. Like we're talking contractors, foremen, and about 70 teenagers to go to this
Oh
small
my
town.
word.
Okay, yeah, we're crazy here. We went to repeatedly, year after year after year after year, to a small town in West Virginia that had been blighted. They had just suffered tragedy after tragedy after tragedy, and there was no help. And so we took on this community to support. So in addition to raising the funds, I'm like in my 20s. Okay, just keep
Oh
this
my
in
word.
mind. I'm responsible for all these humans, but I'm also responsible for setting the tone and the programming in order for these experts to do the work of rebuilding community. Well, what do I know about any of this? Nothing. So I was good at organizing and I got people organized. I was good at staffing, so I made sure we're staffed. I was good at logistics, so I was able to make sure the right people were in the logistical roles and I could support them. Here's the thing that I could do that nobody else wanted to or needed to do. I literally cleaned every toilet and every shower in our host facility, which was a high school, as soon as my crews left in the morning, because I thought they deserved to come home and take a shower in a clean bathroom. And that was, for me, it was a really important part of being a custodian of culture, custodian of vibing, because it was a demonstration physically of the commitment I made to my people. Now, I'm not suggesting that a CEO goes and cleans a toilet. I mean, sometimes you need
Maybe
to. Yeah.
it needs to be cleaned.
Yeah. But I am suggesting that there is a radical physical demonstration of commitment that leaders make to their people, whether they are seen or unseen. And I'm willing to bet 80% of the people that I served on that trip that were serving communities had no idea how those toilets and showers got cleaned. I'm glad. But that really helped me understand that for being a custodian, there are certain things that I love doing in the companies I've worked with. Like, I loved being the person that cleaned the dishes after the team lunch. I loved being the person that just silently took care of the details that were so not what my degrees were preparing me for. And that for me kept me really humble and tuned into why I was doing what I was doing in the first place. Now, Kristi, flipping into the architect's role, really very, very fortunate in the career experiences I've had and education and the desire to just learn everything. And that started early when I learned from the mistakes of my siblings, right? There is so much that we can learn if we're hungry. And so I believe that I reserve the right to get smarter every day. And there's someone who's going to teach me something. And so as I moved into different roles and responsibilities in different industries, I became acutely aware of the lack of vision and vibe that a lot of leaders led with. And so I would ask questions, or I would speak up, or I would suggest something, or I would position myself as a helper, as a custodian that was actually starting to architect. And so I identified that values, organizational values, human values, individual values, they actually are part of that engineering that need to happen in an organization to create a vibe that feels more like an aroma than a stink.
Why do you think leaders don't pay attention or don't understand the value of vibes in the workplace? Because I'm with you, like they just sometimes are just like overlooked, and I can't, especially nowadays, you would think like there's so much information out there, so much about like the energy that's created in the workplace actually leads to, more production and like better results. And yet people still question that. And so I wonder, like, based on your experience, was there any like theme that you saw from leaders that just disregarded the vibe as being important? Like, was there any type of trait or reason why?
In my opinion, there's a couple.
Okay.
Okay, so one of them is discipline. I think that there is a discipline required to have full presence, to offer your full presence to the people in front of you. The discipline of refusing to multitask, the discipline of being the owner of your calendar and your schedule, the discipline of prioritization, the discipline of no, the discipline of, if this is what I have to do at my executive level, I will not hold others accountable to that same level of commitment. That discipline, I think, is a really big part of where vibe falls short.
So interesting. Yeah.
Painful. It's painful to say that out loud. And if you're an executive leader hearing this, and you're cringing at your steering wheel as you're driving, then that's probably a sign that my friend has
Fine.
work to do.
For sure. For sure. And awareness is like the first part, right? Like just being aware that you're not disciplined.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what stinks for a lot of executive leaders who set the vibe tone is like they think they're doing it all and they're doing a favor for everyone. And they're not. They may be effective, but they might be creating stink. And that's really hard to fall in love with. And you want your employees to have the best work of their life where they come home and that aroma's on them and everyone wants to get a sniff. And that's where I really just think about what do you do then? So many executive leaders are in the habit. So we have our discipline and then, discipline becomes a habit. And so they find themselves in a bad habit and they can't get enough shiny new things and shiny new models in the door to help change it. And so what happens is their employees end up with whiplash. They've taken all these different changes and these new programs and these fun initiatives and it's a good-hearted leader who brings them on. But without that core issue of discipline and all of those areas I mentioned, and maybe a few more personal ones, then employees don't take seriously those changes. And so the third part comes into how do you fix that? Leaders, get your discipline on, right? Like really get your discipline on. Cascade that down. Set metrics about that kind of accountability based on what you need. And then you tune into the values that drive your organization and you evaluate them. Are these values today things that we have examples of from the past 30, 60, or 90 days that we can see? Do we need to redefine these values to fit who we are today? And can we create behaviors that identify each of these values in action that we call ourselves to and call our employees to so that our vibe becomes an aroma that every person who walks into our building or comes across an employee feels and smells. And I'm telling you, it takes you right into grandma's kitchen. She doesn't just make meatballs. She's got the method for making the meatballs. And it's gritty and her hands get dirty. That's the kind of leaders we need. We need leaders who are elbow deep in ground meat with veal and pork getting in there, like really.
Yeah, to make this beautiful, delicious thing at the end, right? Like, what does it look like? The end result that you want depends on like what you put into it, right? In the heart and the soul that you pour into it. Okay, how do you get somebody who is like, and I'm sure you've seen this with your coaching clients, right? Somebody who's like, discipline, I have discipline. And you're like, okay. Like, how do you assess that? And then how do you start to get the wheels turning to like maybe somebody's definition is different than how you would describe it or what it takes to be disciplined, right? So like what does that look like in helping somebody uncover their belief of themselves being disciplined enough to get a result?
Yeah. Okay. So it's so much easier to do this as a coach and a consultant. I would prefer 100 times to do it as a coach and a consultant. I do not prefer it to do it as someone inside a culture as the head of people and culture. And I say this because I've been now on both ends. And, it's a little scary when you're the person on salary and you're telling the person who signs your check, you're doing it wrong. So,
Right.
so let's go there first. So one of the things is, I ask questions about discipline and habits, especially in facilitating some of these executive sessions where there's a problem that needs to be solved and let's get there. And so a lot of times it's about asking questions to reveal truth. And once you reveal truth, which is objective facts that we can observe from external, asking questions to discover what's the result of this? Is this result the intended result? And how far away from the intended result that you want is reality? And that's really, really tough. And so there is an art. So for anyone who's inside an organization saying, okay, we need a vibe check, let's get this right. This is how you tread carefully. You ask questions to discover if the results are really what was desired by this behavior that's observable. And if it's not, then you can start to ask questions about going back to those values. Well, what are the behaviors we want to see in an organization? And then leveling that up to the executive team. Are these behaviors that you are consistently and routinely demonstrating? And that's where the accountability starts. And trust builds over time. So it is going to take time for the members of your organization to trust these new behaviors. So consistency has to show up. So that means that a leader who builds trust is going to demonstrate consistency, commitment, clear communication, and competency. And if a leader can have those 4 pieces of their puzzle routinely demonstrated, then their organization will trust and follow the vibe.
And gosh, that discipline kicks in there again, right? Because it's like you have to have the discipline to consistently do those things over and over and over again. I've had so many conversations with leaders about just showing up to communicate. And they're like, but we've already said that. I'm like, say it again and again and again and again and again, right? Like it takes time for people to know that that's what you actually mean, or that's what you're trying to say. And so often leaders just like communicate one thing and then move on to the next, right? Because they've also had probably months to prepare for whatever they're or weeks at least to prepare for whatever they're communicating, but they forget that they're communicating it for the first time to the majority of the organization, right? Or like their team or whatever. The team hasn't had time to process it, understand it, ask questions around it. I'm like, so just say it again. I already did. I'm like, say it again.
It goes 7 times. Well,
Yeah, exactly.
Here's the easiest way to diminish your impact on an organization as a leader. And it's so easy with everything Zoom. If you are multitasking during a meeting, it's so obvious, first of all. Second of all, it's so rude. And third of all, it undoes all the power of good that you have made present. So that's the first change for a leader who's like, okay, now that they're hitting the steering wheel, they're sitting in traffic, hitting the steering wheel because we're just like nailing them and we don't mean to. We just want to make you better. But the first thing you can do is just make a decision. I will not multitask. That is the first thing. And P.S., your brain needs it. The brain cannot function as a multitasker. There's no such thing as multitasking for your brain. It's quickly switching cognitive actions. And the older you are, the worse it gets. You might think you're great at it, but guess what? The world knows that you're screwing up. So there's a lot of neuroscience telling us that this is not effective. The higher the stakes, the worse it is. The second thing is, don't be late. I know you're important, but don't be late. When you have an appointment with an employee, when you have an appointment with a work team, and you cancel or reschedule or show up late, you're sending a message of value. So an executive leader who wants to start to correct some of these bad habits and create a new discipline has to actually go through some very hard prioritization and make decisions about the internal versus external speed. And the better an employer treats their employees, the better that employee will represent the organization.
100%. I mean, reach goes far beyond the walls or, proverbial walls now that many people are remote of the workday or the workplace. Like gone are the days that you just like check in, do the thing and check out and nobody talks about it, right? Or they only talk about it in a good way or just in that they've been there a long time or what have you. Gone are those days. Like the best marketing is your former employees and how they talk about an organization, right? Or the current employees and how they talk about a current organization. And you can feel it. You call a call center to get your cell phone bill corrected and you just feel it. There's good ones and there's terrible ones, right? You just know exactly how the organization operates just by having that conversation. Honestly.
Yeah. And if you want to know the vibe of your organization, do a search on Reddit, do a look at Glassdoor. If you want to know the vibe, go ahead, because the veil of anonymity brings the extreme truth. And that's painful. And guess what? Even if you feel like it's an exaggeration, something had to happen to get someone to make their fingers type those words.
Totally. 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 Okay, so now you're kind of in this new space, right? Of coaching and can I say it? Like you have a web series coming out and that hasn't been launched yet, but it may by the time this comes out. I'm not quite sure timing wise, but like you're in this new space. So tell me why, like what brought you here and why you're doing this. And then yeah, your impact that you're having on the world and hope to have on the world, right? And vibes in the workplace.
Absolutely. Well, vibes in the workplace is my jam. I believe that everyone should have an opportunity to be doing the best work of their life. And it transcends role, title, industry, hours. When we are picking up the aroma, that just makes everything better. And so about a year ago, a little over a year ago, early in 2024, I was working in an industry and a company and a dream job, and really connected with my employees, really connected with the people I served, and really looked at my role as being so important. And so I mentioned earlier, I love work. I was working and away from home so much because I loved it. And I was meeting the demands of reality with an imbalance of home and work. And so I pick up the phone one morning because we had an employee who had not reported for work in an inexcusable amount of time. And so as soon as it hit my desk, I snapped into my protocol, contact the next of kin, got a call back immediately that this young man had been buried. He had suffered from some challenges and had died by suicide. And I spoke to his mother in such a human way that morning and told her the things about her son that I just loved, and these moments and comical moments and tender moments, and walked with her on that in that call. And as I had to practice everywhere I've ever worked, I had a picture of my sons above my desk talking to her, and I looked up and it was like the visit to an eye doctor when it's like, is this better or is this better? Is this clear or is this clear? Oh my gosh, it became clear I was doing it wrong because I had these two beautiful boys that I had waited my whole life to get. And I was away from them more than I was home, and I was listing things. And so I did the necessary and appropriate and responsible functions of being a custodian of our vibe in the days and weeks that followed. But I knew I needed to leave, and I needed to create a life that allowed me to help people navigate the narrow spaces of work and life so that they could have a chance at the best work of their life, so they could have a chance at the life they deserved. So, in my bedroom for the past several years, probably 7, 8 years, I've had a whiteboard, weirdo, I know, that said, it said, if you live your life according to your values, you get to live the life you deserve. Now, I probably have stated that, and it's no secret now, but I probably stated it in every talk I've given. And I mean, like this thing, I say it constantly. I would coach people with that. I would remind them. I would bring it into every conversation, because when we do become architects of our own lives, we can create anything that's right for us. You got to know that. And so I knew I needed to leave. So I exited the company on May 12th of 2024. On May 13th, my kids and we partied. We spent the whole summer.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
It was great. We spent the whole summer together as just catching up on lost time. And I had this desire to build a business that allowed me to be really available to serve people who were in leadership roles and who were in peril to create the life that they deserved through understanding their strengths, understanding their values, and becoming architects in their own way. What that emerged into is the narrow spaces, which is now the name of my practice. And I help organizations get really clear about the predictable patterns of behavior that allow people to be free. I help leaders build that discipline because things are just a little different for each person. So I work with these leaders individually on a weekly basis. Some of my clients I have at 6 a.m. Some of my clients I have at 7 p.m. because I figured out where I can be most present for my family and show up for the people who are hungry. And now it's not a work-life balance issue. We have harmony in our health. I have harmony in my life. I have harmony leveraging my talents. And I can expand the reach of my work so much more. And so one of the surprises was at the end of last year, I discovered I was pregnant. And I'm like, that was not in my plan. And I'm a big planner. This was not in the plan. And this was not in the realm of possibility. So something crazy has happened here. And I mean, I had just started a business.
Right. You're like, wait a minute.
So, and the humor of it all, I realized this is the best thing that could ever happen because I now have absolute points that I have to slow down and check the vibe. I have absolute moments. And one of the moments that came from that was the opportunity to create this mini series called The Narrow Spaces. And has gotten to sit down. I'm done filming. We're in production right now, post-production. I've gotten to sit down with these remarkable leaders from across the country and hear their stories of how they have navigated the narrow spaces of work and life and where the most important moments did not slip through their fingers and where they did. And so that will be coming out in September. And what that is doing is it is allowing me to step back and enjoy this new season of my life where I'm in a narrow space, but guess what? It's a different kind. And I can still help people connect with an opportunity to have the best work of their life, which is what I'm made for that. And that's exciting.
And I love how you said harmony, right? Because there's this ideal that people have talked about for so long called balance. And I don't know that balance. I think that's gosh, it's a hot topic, right? Because I think what is balance? Not balance looks different in every season, I would say, at least from my own experience and in my opinion, right? It's more of this like these different integration points that bring the harmony and the joy. And somebody told me they don't focus on well-being, but they talk about like quality of life because quality of life looks different for every person. And I think that's what you like. Harmony also means that like quality of life and harmony kind of go together for me of like a beautiful orchestra. Not every instrument is working super hard at the same time, right? Like they're playing their part just at the right time when their strength is needed in order to create this beautiful music. But you can't get there until you are intentional about what you're doing, how you're doing it, the values that you've set for yourself, for your organization, for yourself as a leader, for your team, et cetera, right? And that intention becomes hugely, hugely important. And being present in the moment will allow you to have that intention because I know I've had days where I'm multitasking because I feel like I have like 800 things going on, all self-created, by the way. And then I feel like I get nothing done at the end of the day, but yet I've just not really given 100% to anybody throughout the entire day. It's the weirdest phenomenon,
Yeah,
right?
it's hard. It's so hard. Like I always think about achieving balance. So I did keto for a lot of years.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, great results, right? Exhausting, mentally exhausting because you're like measuring and adding and then subtracting. I'm like, what is this? I'm not brave enough, but you're in California. So like, I'm sure you've tried or probably succeeded. You're probably really good at it at surfing. Like people who are
I
good at
am not
surfing.
because I
Okay.
don't like cold water, but my husband surfs. But if the water was like Hawaii, maybe, but it's not. It's cold out here.
We're gonna do a vibe cast on there. Um, but
Yeah.
like we're coming. But you know, you look at someone who surfs, who's done it for years, who's good at it, the athleticism, they look so good. Then you put some like put me on there today. I'm super pregnant. That'd be really fun. But like the work of maintaining balance, every muscle in your body is shaking. That is so much work. And so when I think about work-life balance, the image I get is pregnant Holly on a surfboard. It ain't cute. It's comical. It ain't cute.
And it's hard.
Yes. That's not how we want to spend and end our days. When we develop skills and have discipline, we can actually accomplish really difficult things with ease. But there's a lot of steps between the sand and this and being up on a
In the
board.
surf, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of steps. And to just walk in the sand some days, that's a lot of work. So let's celebrate singular focus, full presence, showing up for the person in front of you, doing the things that you know you ought to do, even if it's hard, eliminating the noise, and sometimes getting elbow deep in the work that needs to happen. Like we make beautiful things through the hard work and that discipline.
Totally. And there's this one quote that actually my husband sent to me not too long ago, and it's going along with the surfing theme. It says, "Better waves make better surfers. Are you on the right beach?" And so I think that that it goes along and kind of sums up everything we've been talking about is like you as a human being, are you on the right beach? Are you doing the right things and on the right beach to do your best work to surf that great wave? Maybe you need little tiny waves with a longboard. Maybe you need big waves with a shortboard. Maybe you need warm water. Maybe you need cold water. But what beach are you on? And make sure it's the right one in order to do your best work. So, okay, as we wrap, I want to hear from you. If people are listening and there's one thing, just one thing they could step away and start doing today as the podcast goes off, they're like, "Oh, I'm so inspired. It was so good. Now what do I do?" What is that one thing that somebody could walk away with, whether they're leading a big team, whether they're just leading themselves, whether they're leading their family, whoever they're leading and creating that aroma, what is the thing that they should go do next in order to start that journey to make those vibes amazing?
Okay, so as soon as you wake up tomorrow morning, make your bed. Just make your bed. Keep the commitment of making your bed every day. And then stop multitasking when you go to work.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. Okay, and that's a rule in our house for summer. Get up and
I
make your
love
bed.
it. It's on our summer rules too. Yeah, it's there. There's a lot of research that supports this.
That is true. And like you said, it's a lot easier to learn when they're little versus waiting till you're 35 and you're married and your wife's telling you to make your bed.
Yeah. We have to have half the bed made when I leave. And then the other half, it just stays disgusting until I get sick of it and make it later in the day. But I like we're separate sheet users. Yeah, like it's fine. It's fine. That's how we stay married. We just keep
There you
separate sides
go.
of sheets.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Holly, so much. I can't wait to watch your web series and just watch your journey and, see your new baby soon. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and your time with us today. I really appreciate it.
You are so fun, Kristi. Thanks.
I loved chatting with Holly and how she described how a vibe is like the aroma of your workplace, unseen but deeply felt. I think that's something everyone can relate to. And whether you're leading a team or just starting your career, your presence, actions, and values shape more than just productivity. They shape the vibe. Isn't it fascinating to think about your role in vibes as either a vibe custodian or a vibe architect? I love how Holly articulated this and the difference and transition from one to the other. A vibe custodian meaning caring for the roots, and a vibe architect truly creating the structure for that aroma. And to create a healthy workplace vibe, Holly talked about how this isn't just a one time thing, it's a daily practice rooted in discipline, authenticity, and harmony between life and work. It's something you have to do often and think about, keep at the forefront of how you go about your day. So I want you all to think about, does your vibe stink, or does it have an aroma you want to take with you everywhere you go? Are you more of a vibe architect or a vibe custodian? And do you have the discipline to be fully present and act with intention in all that you do? Just some food for thought. So stay curious, stay courageous, and keep vibing, my friends. If this episode inspired you and you want to see how you can take the next step to creating a better vibe within your organization, I'd love for you to download our complimentary 75 Vibes worksheet. This is a simple tool to create a habit and mindset around creating great vibes in work and life. The best part, it's simple and it works.